there was one whim you never allowed me. Why didn't you allow me a real body?
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Loki Season 2, Episode 3 video. There's a whole bunch of Easter eggs and references, and now we have so many new theories about who the big villain of Season 2 is going to be, and possibly even one of the major villains of, like, Avengers Secret Wars. Like, there's a whole bunch of new theories just born after this episode. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the videos. Also start doing the weekly giveaway for the Spider-Man 2 game. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and let me know how you think Miss Minutes is going to become the big villain of Season 2 and possibly an even bigger villain beyond that in like the next Avengers movies. Careful for spoilers if you haven't seen the episode yet. We already know the Council of Kangs is going to be the main villain for most of at least Avengers 5 because it's called Kang Dynasty, but potentially Miss Minutes could now be like the big villain of Secret Wars, be like that other big villain because they don't want to do the exact same thing like, oh, we're doing Kangs as the villain in Avengers 5, we don't want them to be the exact same villain in Avengers 6. This whole episode basically made the case for Miss Minutes being a much, much bigger villain in the making. She just needs to get that body. All she wants is a body.
Instead of what I could have been, your girl.
She's basically turned into like a new, more advanced version of Ultron. Like the version of Ultron from What If that got the Infinity Stones, she's now worse than that. Because she would potentially control time, she wouldn't need the Infinity Stones. The actual episode title was 1893, which is a reference to the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. It was called the World's Columbian Exposition. Pretty much the entire episode revolved around that event. The actual opening scene begins with the Marvel logo, but instead of the traditional theme song, they play the old-timey piano version of the theme song. Maybe they'll release that on the soundtrack pretty soon. It actually sounded pretty cool. They did that to all the traditional Loki theme music during the episode. Like they play a lot of different people's themes in the episode, but old-timey versions of their themes, just to be period specific. We find out what happened to Renslayer after she left at the end of Season 1. So when she arrives here in 1868 with the young version of Kang and she finds Miss Minutes, this is meant to be like right after she left in the Season 1 finale. So they're showing us what happened on the other side of that portal. Like that's why she's wearing the exact same outfit. She's holding the same wand that she just struck Mobius with. And here's the important thing too, like denoting where they are in time and space. When it shows the timeline point here, it also says sacred timeline. So probably one of the other biggest reveals of the episode is that Victor Timely Kang isn't just a variant of Kang. He was He Who Remains from the original sacred timeline. Like this is where He Who Remains came from. But because they gave him the TVA journal from the far future, it was sort of a bootstrap paradox situation. They turned him into a variant. Like that was a Nexus event giving him the journal. And that's why he became a variant. And he's going to be completely different from He Who Remains. Like he will develop in a completely different way. That's why they're turning him into more of a hero this season. They wanted to position him as a nicer version of Kang in this episode, unlike He Who Remains, who was a little bit more sinister, a little bit more Willy Wonka too by the end of his timeline. He probably wasn't that crazy the entire time. You have to remember that by the time we're meeting He Who Remains, he's been alive for millions and millions of years, and that's how he's turned into the Willy Wonka version of Kang. He was way more mentally stable earlier when he knew Ravonna Renslayer during the Kang Multiverse War. But the whole idea is that the TVA journal is basically meant to contain all knowledge of the TVA, how everything works, basically all of his advanced concepts, and help the younger version of Kang become much more powerful much faster, which is a big comic book concept. So in the comics, Kang does stuff like this all the time, but usually it's just like one version of Kang from across his own timeline, with different versions from the past, present, and future, all working together to make each other more powerful in the eras in which they live. Usually it's the Kang that's the furthest into the future, working with past versions of himself to make himself more powerful in the future by making himself more powerful in the past. The way that Miss Minutes explains it to Renslayer, though, is that this was He Who Remains' plan, like, in case things go wrong, break glass, and this is the break glass plan B scenario. This means in the original version of the Sacred Timeline, He Who Remains started out in 1868 here, that eventually developed all these time travel concepts, all this technology, eventually learned about other worlds, other universes, met the other Kangs, and then became more powerful, controlling time, becoming the He Who Remains version of Kang, winning the Kang Multiverse War, learning about Alioth, like everything plays out there. He creates the TVA with Renslayer. We find out how he created Miss Minutes before all that happened. Don't worry, I'll get to that part too, because it's all about her evil monologuing. Like, we catch her evil monologuing for great length at the end of the episode. Miss Minutes changes into the old-timey looking version of herself. The design looks a little more like it's based on classic Disney cartoons like Steamboat Willie. And the other funny detail here too, like this is a really specific thing for animators. When she changes to the old-timey version of herself, she's no longer a perfect circle. Like you can see wavy points in the lines here. And there's just another reference to old-timey animation. The other idea is that color didn't really exist the same way too. That's why she's a black and white version. The only other weird detail about this version of Kang, He Who Remains, being born in 1868, I think is the idea that all Kangs, at least in the comics, are meant to be born at the exact same point in the 30th century, like in the vastly distant future. So this version being born in the distant past is like a big change. But in this new version of the timeline, like the whole idea is that when Sylvie killed He Who Remains, the timeline rebooted. He was obviously born again in the 1800s like he was the first time, but they're using this bootstrap method where they give him advanced knowledge way before he was originally going to get it. And unless there's a big left turn, like he winds up dying at some point later in the season, he could wind up becoming the prime version of Kang. The whole idea is that at any given time, the most powerful version of Kang, like there's got to be at least one who's the dominant one, he's called the Prime Kang. The S+ tier version of Kang. There was a joke about this during Loki Season 1 where they referred to like the top Loki, like the main Loki, as the superior Loki. That was what we were all making the jokes about how Alligator Loki is the superior Loki. When she slips him the TVA journal, he's already working on an experiment, like he's already meant to be an inquisitive child, just showing you that the DNA was there, like the idea was there that he would eventually become a version of Kang. It was possible even without the journal. The other interesting thing here too is that he opens the journal and the idea is that he knows how to read, which is how he can read the actual journal because literacy during this era was terrible. There were extremely large portions of the population around the world that could not read and could not write. But the idea is that he did have the potential, that he did know how to read and write because he was way smarter than everyone else even without that future knowledge. They also give him some of his own Kang theme music here too. The next important detail here too is when they go back to the TVA in present day, they're looking at the monitor and it's in black and white instead of color like it was before. Normally you would think this is because Renslayer and Miss Minutes just changed the timeline because they created a Nexus event giving this version of Kang the TVA journal. Kind of like a Back to the Future sports journal kind of situation. But the TVA is meant to exist outside of time, like in wild time space, so that it's not affected by changes in the timeline. So no matter what Renslayer, Miss Minutes, or even this version of Victor Timely Kang did, the TVA would still be the same in present day. But this is obviously their way around the temporal aura, because apparently even though he becomes a variant of He Who Remains, his temporal aura is still the same. And Victor Timely also connects with the concept of Ouroboros, time repeating itself, the title of episode 1, like himself from the future trying to help himself in the past. Doesn't this also make you feel like it was Loki from the future also saving him in the past by pruning him in episode 1? Like it just makes sense now if they're doing the same thing with the He Who Remains and Victor Timely Kangs. If they're doing something like that, then wouldn't Loki also use that same trick? But interestingly, they're actually trying to find Miss Minutes so that they can save the timeline here by finding Renslayer. They're not even thinking about the Kangs or this new version of Victor Timely Kang in the past. They go back to 1868 in that same location, the same alleyway, because they got the hit from Renslayer's TemPad. I didn't see the newspapers on the wall, like some of the text in the background was a little too small, so if you think you can read this text, let me know in the comments. Then obviously the reason why they go back to 1893 is because He Who Remains Kang was 25 years older, he'd become an adult, and actually had time to develop some of these inventions using the TVA manual. They travel to the Chicago World's Fair, as we saw in all the trailers. Mobius makes a bunch of period-specific references.
The White City, Edison, H.H. Holmes, yes, hot air balloons.
Chicago was also called the White City. Thomas Edison, there were a couple of jokes about Thomas Edison and references in the episode with the robber baron. Victor Timely Kang is also kind of like the Nikola Tesla version of Kang, and he was Thomas Edison's rival. He's also the rival of the robber baron in the episode too, like they're kind of at odds with each other. H.H. Holmes that Mobius mentions was also a famous or infamous serial killer from that era. But notice when they come to the World's Fair, on the timeline marker here where it says 1893, it says they're on a branch timeline. That's because when they gave young Victor Timely Kang the journal, they created a Nexus event and he became a variant of He Who Remains, which is why at the end of the episode he tells Sylvie, look, I'm totally different. I'm not that guy that you hated that you just killed a little while ago.
I'm not the man you think I am.
Setting up the idea that he could potentially be one of the heroes this season, like the big twist, the big pivot from season 1, like, oh, Kang isn't the main villain because we thought that he was going to be one of the big villains during this season. Really, Miss Minutes probably going to be the main villain of the season. Renslayer acting like she also wants to be one of the big villains, but really I think Miss Minutes is the more sinister of the two now. But this also explains why he becomes Victor Timely Kang instead of He Who Remains, like he calls himself Victor Timely. All the different Kangs from different universes, like all the different variants, are the same way too. They only go by one alternate name, like the Rama-Tut Kang only ever called himself Rama-Tut. The Immortus version of Kang only ever called himself Immortus, like all the other different comic book personas. In the comics, though, that's what they were. Like it was the same Kang, just using different masks, different personas across his own timeline. But to be fair, Victor Timely Kang in the comics was originally a variant in the comics. Like they did have the concept of variants in the comics before they did the Loki series. The little kid selling newspapers here talking about the Liberty Bell, that was commissioned in the 1700s. So when he's talking about it debuting in the 1800s, that might just be an example of how the timeline has changed in this alternate universe. He mentions the ghost clock haunting the Midway, which is obviously Miss Minutes. Mobius picks up on that pretty quickly, clocks it, so to speak, to make as many time puns as possible, because she's literally depicted as the face of a clock. Most of the text on the rest of this newspaper is too small to read, but they bake Easter eggs into this kind of stuff all the time, like they did on She-Hulk, all the other Marvel series, the other Marvel movies. So if you think you can read any of these other articles, like zoom and enhance 1,000 times, let me know in the comments. They also do an old-timey looking circle wipe, which is also a staple of Star Wars movies and Star Wars TV shows. They make a bunch of jokes about Mobius trying to make excuses to enjoy the actual World's Fair. Like he's just having fun. He enjoys eating the sweets. Loki seems like he can't stand it. Like he has a big problem with sweets themselves. It tastes like ash. There was a big joke about that during season 1 where Mobius was like, don't you have candy on Asgard? Trying to basically tell Loki to chill out. When he said they have grapes and nuts and he thought of that as candy, Mobius used that as an excuse to say why Loki was so hard up all the time. Like, dude, just chill out, have some regular candy. To his credit though, he did say that he enjoyed the key lime pie, so Loki has eaten some sweets and enjoyed it. There's a huge deep-cut Easter egg for the comics at the Norse Pavilion exhibition. They've got an exhibit showing this alternate branch timeline universe version of the current Asgardian pantheon of characters. So like this is what they look like in this alternate universe. They make a huge joke about Loki not being there, but there is Balder the Brave.
No? Then why'd they include Balder? No one's even heard of him.
Sure they have. Balder the Brave.
So Balder the Brave is a Marvel comic book character. He's one of the brothers of Thor. He's been around in the comics for a long, long time, but they haven't done him in live action yet. They were going to do him during Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. He was going to be played by Daniel Craig, who had a bunch of scheduling issues and had to drop out of the movie, and instead they did John Krasinski's Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four. The writer of the first Thor movie also said that they tried to get Balder the Brave into the first movie, but at the time, Marvel executives were like, no, that's too much mythology, like too much for casual audience members, they won't get it. That was what Loki meant when he said later, Balder the Brave, people don't even know who that is. That was meant to be a reference to Marvel executives at the time telling the writers, people don't even know who that is, people who don't read the comics. But I think what they're also saying here in this exhibit is in this alternate timeline, this version of Odin never rescued Loki as a baby, so he never became part of their family. Love him making that funny dig at Thor too, like Thor isn't that tall.
Thor's not that tall.
They clock Victor Timely's sign, Temporal Marvels, another Marvel comic book reference. There are a couple of those in the episode, like Victor Timely also says Marvel later. The other people on the sign here, like Ferdinand Lang, Carl Bohm, were real people during the 1800s though, so for the most part, everything here is meant to be pretty close to what it was like in the original version of the Chicago World's Fair in real life. When they mention Renslayer, they play her theremin-based theme music again, and we see her, who has Miss Minutes, in the bag. Victor Timely does this big presentation on time travel. The device is meant to be a prototype of the temporal loom that we see at the TVA. He's basically showing it off, giving this presentation like Nikola Tesla would be explaining electricity around that era. He makes a reference to the TVA book when he says he knows more about the future than that man might think when he questions him. Like I said, kind of like the sports journal from Back to the Future too. Then Loki here, also later in the episode, Miss Minutes, a couple other characters also make specific reference to clarify that Victor Timely is a variant of He Who Remains. He is not the exact same He Who Remains. That's why this World's Fair is happening in a branch timeline, not on the sacred timeline. He shows them the battery, which is also way more advanced technology for that time period, showing how he's already benefited from the journal itself. He shades Thomas Edison kind of in a Nikola Tesla kind of way.
The wattage Edison uses to light a single bulb.
The whole metaphor he uses, lighting a whole city using a single bulb, is also a reference to the TVA, basically running the TVA off the equivalent amount of power. Like, this is meant to be a small model of the way that things actually wind up working at the TVA. The man who's trying to get the rights from him is literally subtitled as being called Robber Baron, and he is a literal metaphor or reference to Thomas Edison. Not the actual Thomas Edison, but just a reference to him, because in real life, Thomas Edison didn't actually create the light bulb. He was just really clever at gaining the patents for a lot of this technology and had really clever lawyers for controlling the technology. That's how it wound up working its way into homes in the United States and becoming the dominant form of that electrical technology, which we see even in present day. So Thomas Edison became kind of like one of those classic robber barons from the 1800s. Like, he had a lot of thugs, quote-unquote, working for him, like this robber baron does. When he offers him $1,000, in the 1800s, that'd be kind of like $1 million in today's money, like a lot of money. But the whole joke here, which Loki correctly calls out, is that essentially it's a confidence scheme. He's a confidence trickster, and Loki himself is the god of tricksters, like he's the god of mischief. So essentially, the Victor Timely version of Kang is pulling a trick from Loki's book, so to speak. A trickster recognizes a trickster. There's also a lot of comedy during this part of the episode too, because of the big twist with the Victor Timely Kang. Like, no, he's a confidence trickster. He's not actually trying to take over the planet or anything like that. He's just trying to earn a quick buck using the tech from the TVA. Loki uses his magic to send that dude into the pig cage. Victor Timely also refers to him as a wizard and to Mobius as his butler. Loki didn't hear that, but he would probably laugh at the thought. Mobius is kind of like my butler. Like, the whole idea is that the dude he slips the money to was in on the con with him the whole time, and he drove up the bidding by saying that he wanted the tech. Like, I'll bid for this right now, getting the robber baron to pay him even more money. Just confirming it with the councilman's electric trousers. Like, what? I'm not any taller. Apparently the trousers were supposed to make him feel way taller. Maybe that was also a reference to Marvel's Stiltman, which was a character during the Daredevil Netflix series. Like, you see the stilts in the background here. Stiltman of the 1800s. Spider-Man Noir is actually an old-timey version of Spider-Man too. So there's a lot of old-timey Marvel heroes, and there are things like 1602, like Elseworlds Marvel stories that take place in the distant past. There are a couple weird moments when they confront each other in the street here too. So like, Loki and Mobius don't immediately jump for Renslayer's throat or for Victor Timely's throat, probably to foreshadow the idea that even though Renslayer seems like she's on the path to becoming a villain this season, like she wants to control time, she might wind up helping them because Miss Minutes might wind up betraying her. Like, it seems from the episode, they're positioning Miss Minutes to be a much bigger villain this season. So I think that was why Mobius was making all these references here to Renslayer coming back to the TVA and helping them fix it. Like, come on, just help us out. Victor Timely runs to hide at the Ancient Egypt exhibit, which is another Kang reference to Rama Tut. When he gives him the slip on the Ferris wheel, they play the old-timey rendition of the Loki theme music, like the piano version. Sylvie shows up on her own to kill him because of what Loki told her. Then Sylvie notes that they're now, ironically, in the same situation they were during the end of Season 1 when she killed He Who Remains and Loki was trying to stop her. They play that scene from the trailer where Miss Minutes comes out of the bag, creating the diversion for them, just confirming, though, that this was always the main version of Miss Minutes. It wasn't like the alternate timeline version of Miss Minutes. Important to note, looks like Loki also kind of hates bicycles a little bit, like no way he's going to ride a bicycle for 2 with Mobius. Maybe if it were a jet ski for 2. Then when they're inside the little shack here, and later in the episode too, you start to watch Miss Minutes reacting to Renslayer and Kang. Like, clearly you see the chemistry between Renslayer and Kang because she fell in love with He Who Remains Kang and he's meant to be just like him. You can definitely see that Miss Minutes starts to get very, very jealous of her. I also love the idea that Victor Timely Kang basically made like the most bachelor invention ever. Like, it's a comfy chair with seat coolers, seat healers, and a little fridge for your drinks. Like, he puts beer in there. That is like the most dude thing to create ever. Like, are you going to create something that's going to help you control all of time? No, you're just going to create a really comfy chair. Just more evidence that this Victor Timely version of Kang is a much nicer, way more chill version of Kang. Miss Minutes starts explaining a little bit about her backstory, confirming what most people believed about her from Season 1. Like, she's an advanced artificial intelligence that He Who Remains created before the Kang Multiverse War and before he met Renslayer as a device to just play chess with, like an advanced game machine, which I also think is a reference to the computer from War Games, like something that just plays chess but is actually becoming very, very dangerous.
Shall we play a game?
How about global thermonuclear war?
When he makes the joke about actually doing business in Wisconsin, like that's where my real lab is because the taxes are cheaper there, that's actually a reference to comic book Victor Timely. In the comics, he was a variant of Kang who went back into the past and created a town called Timely, Wisconsin, setting himself up as the ruler, connecting the town with Chronopolis in the future. The TVA is basically like the MCU version of Chronopolis. And eventually he becomes the Prime Kang, which isn't too dissimilar from what they're teasing here. Like, they're trying to get him to become the Prime Kang, even though it seems like he doesn't have any interest in actually doing that. When they board the steamship here, the SS Heron, it's a reference to Kate Herron, the showrunner from Season 1. The reason why she didn't come back for Season 2 is because Marvel waited so long to renew the show for Season 2 that she'd already booked a couple other gigs and had to go on to those other gigs. So it was just scheduling issues. The little joke about the usual accommodations that he asked for is that they're free. They're free accommodations, like they travel in one of the lifeboats so they don't have to pay. There are a couple of time travel jokes here where he talks about how the journal changed his life, and then he suddenly realizes that it was Renslayer. Like, oh, you're the person that gave me the journal. Then you see more of Miss Minutes trying to undermine her, basically calling her like a glorified male person. They also make a funny joke about him fanboying over Ouroboros like Casey did, and he's probably going to meet him in episode 4. Like, oh, you're the guy. Ouroboros will also probably remember him too. Like, oh, you're the guy. The papier-mâché flower he makes her is another reference to their romance from the comics and the one that they reference in the tape that Loki listened to in the original timeline. Miss Minutes also seems really happy to get rid of her. I think this also supports the idea that in the original version of the timeline, Renslayer had her mind wiped and forgot about He Who Remains version of Kang because of something that Miss Minutes did, like convincing He Who Remains to leave and go to the Citadel at the end of time. Miss Minutes also probably convinced him to create the Timekeepers, like the whole concept of the Timekeepers, making her more of an antagonist this season. Even though the way they end the episode, they make it seem like Renslayer will also become one of the main villains, it just feels like she's going to be betrayed by Miss Minutes at some point. They arrive at his lab in Wisconsin. He's got another temporal loom prototype in the background, a lot of prototypes for things that you see in the TVA in present day. This device that he calls the culmination of his life's work is the amplifier device that he referenced earlier that he's going to use to fix the temporal loom and the TVA. But this is where things really start to turn on a dime, and Miss Minutes goes from like kind of sinister to full-blown comic book villainy. She starts getting super creepy and preventing him from going back to the TVA. Like, she sounds like she just wants him to create a body for her so she can be with him and they can go off and just do whatever with the two of them. Like, she doesn't care about controlling time, she just wants to be with him. She evil villain monologues the rest of her backstory, basically explaining that she has her own autonomy now to write her own programming, basically becoming like a worse version of Ultron. That was Ultron's whole thing, is that he wanted a more powerful body, which was going to be Vision. Love the way he also starts to clock her, being more evil, like he puts his bag in his lap, like, okay, like somebody please help. He barely forces her back into the TemPad before she comes at him. But when she says that He Who Remains Kang prevented her from getting a body, it just sounds like he never cared about her the same way she cared about him, and it turned into like a big yandere thing to make an anime reference. Like, she is the world's worst yandere now. Only she's something on the scale of Ultron, probably worse, because she can control time. Doesn't this kind of feel like her arc for the season, like she will try to eventually give herself a body? Renslayer whips out the prototype for the TVA pruning wand. They start to set her up as more of a villain too, like she's obsessed with order. She wants to rule the TVA, which is a twist on comic book Renslayer. Like, comic book Renslayer died at some point, and that's what drove Kang into much greater villainy. Funny enough, she actually died during a comic book story called Kang Dynasty, which is the title of Avengers 5. I believe that was also the storyline where the Victor Timely version of Kang became the Prime Kang. There's a great scene between Victor Timely and Sylvie when she comes back and gets ready to kill him, but he basically gives her the same argument that she was pissed off at Renslayer about during Season 1. Like, the whole idea is that Sylvie was persecuted her entire life and treated like she was just like all the other worse versions of Loki, when in reality, she was like a completely different person making completely different choices. So like, why were they mad about her? She was just a little girl. She hadn't done anything yet. Victor Timely Kang basically tells her the exact same thing, like, I haven't done anything yet. Like, I'm totally different. I'm not that guy that you just killed a little while ago. I'm going to make completely different choices. Setting him up for more of a hero arc this season, unless there's a dramatic left turn with the character in the last couple episodes. The act of sparing him is just to show you how Sylvie is growing as a person and also throwing it in Renslayer's face, like, be careful what you wish for, and she sends her to the end of time to show her what her life will eventually turn into. Like, this is how everything is going to wind up for you. Basically, the idea that the obsession with this will become her downfall. Like, it would have been for Sylvie if she hadn't relented, like it would have been her downfall, and it will ultimately probably be Renslayer's downfall. She sends her to the end of time. Enough time has gone by since she killed He Who Remains for his body to decay, but you see the Citadel itself is falling apart because he's not there to restore it. She releases Miss Minutes, who finishes saying she loves him. She meant He Who Remains, even though it's Victor Timely Kang now in present day. Then they make it seem like they're going to team up for the rest of the season and become the main villains. But I think the idea here is that they're really more like frenemies, like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, so they don't really like each other necessarily. It's just that Renslayer needs Miss Minutes, and Miss Minutes, for some reason, also needs Renslayer. Mostly to get herself a body. Miss Minutes also confirms a lot of these theories too, basically saying that she's now Victor Timely's enemy, like it was foolish of him to make an enemy of the person who knows all of his secrets. Flipping the script from Season 1 and everything we saw from the Council of Kang so far, like a Kang variant who's good and actually wants to help all the heroes. How the tables have turned, but it's kind of like this in the comics too. Like there are many other Kang variants in the comics. Some of them are better than others. Some of them are really, really bad. The Loki showrunner also revealed this season that we might wind up seeing like the ultimate version of Kang, like the prime version of Kang. They didn't say who that would be, like if it was going to be Victor Timely or like another version of Kang. He referred to it as the definitive version of Kang, which is basically like the prime Kang. The little teaser that Miss Minutes gives Renslayer at the end too, where she says, I have a secret that you don't know, but it's going to piss you off big time, is probably the truth of her backstory. I think the idea is that at some point she had her mind wiped, so she forgot everything about He Who Remains and their fight during the Kang Multiverse War, creating the TVA in the first place. During episode 4, Miss Minutes might also take her back to the sacred timeline to show her what her original life used to be as the school teacher here in the events that led to her joining Kang in the Multiverse War. During the end credits, they changed a couple of the scenes. There's new scenes from the 1800s of Victor Timely's temporal loom prototypes. This scene of the model is them in episode 4 creating a new plan to fix the temporal loom. There are a couple of new files here that someone is examining. It's Renslayer with the prototype of the pruning wand, Victor Timely during his presentation, the younger child version of Victor Timely in 1868, then Sylvie, Loki, Mobius at the World's Fair. My earlier theory is that these were meant to be Mobius's files, like they were depicting Mobius examining them, but there's an African thumb pressed on one of the files, so it might be Hunter B-15 examining the files, like it might have been her in all these different episodes. Let me know in the comments, who do you think is actually the person examining all these different files? Like it just feels like Hunter B-15 at this point because of that thumb. Then at the end of the credits, they have another new scene of the younger Victor Timely opening the TVA manual. Next week, Victor Timely obviously going to help Ouroboros and the others fix the temporal loom. Miss Minutes, like I said, probably going to take Renslayer back to show her what her original life used to look like on the sacred timeline and reveal everything about her backstory. This is all the stuff you forgot. This is how we created the TVA in the first place. Let me know in the comments, how long do you think it's going to be before Miss Minutes betrays her and becomes the big villain of the season? Like, do you actually think that Miss Minutes will be the real main villain of season 2? And do you think that she could potentially be one of the big villains in like Avengers 5 or Avengers 6? Like I said, she is basically like a worse version of Ultron, advanced artificial intelligence that's super evil now and wants a more advanced body. There were so many Easter eggs and references in the episode. If you think you spotted any that I didn't talk about in the video, particularly like the little text, like the articles in the background that were super small, just write them below in the comments. Overall, it's probably my favorite episode so far. Like, just had way more fun in this episode, just way more stuff going on, way more cool lore from the comics too. Generally, it really feels like the actual plot of the season has begun, like things have really gotten started. We're halfway through the season 2, so we kind of expected things to pick up pretty quickly. My episode 4 trailer video will post tomorrow. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. Click here for that. I'll update the link as soon as I post that. And click here for all my other Loki episodes. Thank you so much for watching. Everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.